Hey everybody, coming at you from out in the wilderness with another exciting video, or depending on your interest it could be semi-exciting. But anyway, we have Nick behind the camera, and today he's using the shoulder mount camera so he can follow me around. And it's such a windy day today that instead of fighting with the wind and dealing with it, we decided to use the old cordless mic, so you probably won't be picking up what all Nick has to say. So I guess I could walk towards the camera for him to give you a quick AO. Hey-o. So maybe that picked that up. All right, today we're doing a tag video. Now, for those of you that wonder, some people ask what a tag video is. It's where a video maker makes a video on a subject and giving their opinions and their ideas and their theories on that subject. Well, then they tag 1, 2, or 3 people to do the same subject, but for them to do a video on it in their own opinions and theories. Okay, so today I was tagged by Laconian Concepts. I think that's the name of it. Let me double check that. Let me check my paper here. Pretty sure that's who it was. Yeah, Laconian Concepts. Okay, and the subject is 5 tips for the beginning wild camper. Okay, some of these can be subject to your interpretation of what the subject is. To me, I interpret as the beginning wild camper would be the person that no longer goes to an established campsite and a person that's just going out into the wild and camping. Because when you go to an established campsite, you know, you pull up, you park, they've got a fire ring, they've got facilities, you know, to go to the bathroom. They've got like a faucet where you have a water supply. You have a place, a nice flat place, established place to put your tent. And you're probably in an area where there's a cell phone signal. And you're about 20 feet from the car. So to me, that's regular camping, that's car camping. Not necessarily, this is not necessarily like backpacking, because with backpacking a lot of times you're going along a trail and they have little established outposts where you can hike, and if you stick to the trail you can't get lost. See, that wind's picking up. If I didn't have the mic, if I didn't have the microphone, it'd be bad.
Any leaves here to look at.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard Nick or not. We'll find out when we review it. But anyway, yeah, there's no leaves here. You can't see the leaves blowing around. But anyway, the wild camping to me is where when you go off into the woods and there's no trail and you're just on your own. So I have 5 tips. And the way I've broken these down is the first 4 tips are going to be a basic ideology theory that you can go by and apply to wild camping. And then the 5th one is just going to be a bunch of just hands-on tips that I'm going to name off. There's going to be like, I don't know, about 10 of them maybe, just little tips in my head that I've come up with. So we're going to start out with the number 1 tip. All right? Let's go. Right there, those leaves are moving around. Most everything here is dead, but those leaves are moving around like crazy. All right. Number 1, not necessarily number 1 tip, just what I'm starting with. Expect the worst, but prepare for the best, okay? You're not going to be going to an established campsite. You're not going to have your 5-gallon container of water. You're not going to have your gallon jugs of water. You're not going to be near a spigot. You're excited. You're wild camping. So you're going to bring either your water filter or you're going to bring your bush pot. And you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to get water out of the creek. You know, every bit of water, I'm either going to filter it or I'm going to boil it. Well, life is good. Plans are perfect if you wind up with a creek like this. This is fantastic. You got nice flowing water. It's reasonably clear. It's not too deep. It's easy to get at. Okay? But here's the thing. What if this creek's totally dried up? What if the area you get to doesn't have a creek? What if the walls of the creek are so deep it's inaccessible? So in that case, prepare for the worst. No, wait a minute. Expect the best, prepare for the worst. Bring some water. Even if it's just a gallon or a half a gallon, bring some water, okay? And that applies to several things. And that's like, let's say you have checked, let's put that up there. Let's say that you have checked the forecast and rain is not expected, so you don't bring rain gear. Well, guess what happens? It rains, it pops up, and it ruins your trip. So, you know, always bring either a poncho or bring a rain jacket and rain pants of some kind, okay? Expect the best, prepare for the worst. Even though rain ain't supposed to come, it could come. Now, let's say that you're out in the wild and you're going to go out there and you're going to be chopping with a machete or an axe, okay? Now, you didn't mean to cut your fingers off, but did you mean not to cut your fingers off, okay? So, expect the best, prepare for the worst. Bring a first aid kit. Bring a full first aid kit, because you're not going to be in a campsite with a camp host there that you can call, or a cell signal to where you can call 911 and have them drive an ambulance out to the campsite. Wild camping, you're going to be on your own. Be sure that you have some kind of a first aid kit or some kind of a medical kit to take care of yourself when you're out there. All right, so 1 down, 4 more to go. For number 2, never assume anything, ever, and looks can be very deceiving. Kind of like whenever you're like, well, that dog's wagging its tail, so I'm gonna pet it. Well, that dog might have wagged its tail all the way up until the time it bit you. So things ain't always as they assume. Do your research, find out, okay? One of the examples of that, let's say that you've donated your tent to Goodwill and you put your sleeping bag out in the doghouse for the dog to sleep on after it bit you. You have now resorted to a tarp and a wool blanket, okay? So you're going to go with a lean-to shelter. You've seen them 1,000 times on YouTube. So you're going to run off into the woods and set up your tarp shelter and have a fire with a wool blanket, okay? Now, when I say things aren't as always as they seem, you have to do your research. So, what I'm going to tell you is one of the examples. Let's say, for example, okay, can you see this good, Nick?
Yeah.
All right. Let's say that this is your lean-to, okay, and you're in here and you're happy and you're smiling, okay, and you've got a big fire out front, okay. There's your fire. Now, things aren't as always as they assume. Let's say that the wind, let's say that this is your tarp and you've got the fire out front. You're like, okay, well, the wind is blowing in this direction, so I'm going to put the tarp here and the fire here so that the wind will be blowing against it. Because if the wind is blowing this way, you're going to blow your flames and your smoke into your shelter. That's not so. If you build it this ways, the wind's coming from this direction. What it's going to do is it's going to whip around and curl around your shelter.
Whoops.
Yeah, whoops, and it's going to pull it in. And this is what I'm talking about just going by just guessing. And then, you know, things aren't as always they assume. Is you think that you want the wind behind you and you're safe. But instead, in reality, what you want is your shelter here, your fire here, and you want the wind blowing this a ways or this a ways. Okay. One other tip real quick while we're talking about that is for determining direction of wind. Wind does move around in different directions, and but you can get a basic idea of where the predominant wind is. And the easiest way to do that in the forest is pick up some dry leaves, some dead dry leaves. And what you want to do is you want to crumble them into a dust. Now, if you're anywhere where there's dirt or sand or dust, you can use that. But in an area like this, you'll want to crumple up leaves, and you want to do this 3 or 4 times before you choose your shelter location. And what you do is you'll just stand for a minute and you'll look around and you'll wait until the wind picks up. And then when the wind picks up, you're going to do this. You're going to drop them. Now see, it's got the wind is predominantly blowing in that direction right there. So then all you do is pull out your compass and find out what direction that is.
Hurricane season, you can also just look at which direction the trees are lying over.
I don't know if they got picked up or not, but Nick said during hurricane season, look for which direction the trees are laying. I got a compass in here somewhere, which leads back to being prepared. But anyway, you get the basic idea. A handful of leaves and drop them down, okay? And then I've got one more example for things aren't always as as they seem to be, okay? Another little sub tip for number 2, things aren't as they always seem. Never assume anything. Let's say, for example, you're going deep into the forest, and this is kind of rare, but it does happen, but this is an example. You're like, oh, I'm a wild camper. I'm not going to be in a tent with a cot. I'm going to bring a hammock, okay? Well, if you bring a hammock, you're assuming that there's going to be spacing of trees, or better yet, the proper trees. Now, if you look behind me, what if the entire area looks like this? What if you've got one big giant tree and then a bunch of broken over trees and vines all around it? Where are you going to put a hammock? Okay, so in that case, when I say never assume anything, this leads back to number 1. Expect the best, prepare for the worst. Not only have you brought your hammock, but also bring you an emergency bivvy. That way, if you resort to laying on the ground because there's no place to hang your hammock up, take the bivvy, wrap up in the hammock like a blanket and crawl in the bivvy and lay on the filthy ground and sleep all night. See? Never assume anything. Okay? Moving on to number 3. Now, number 3, third tip for the beginning wild camper. Test your gear and test your skills, okay? Just because you ran out and bought something doesn't mean that you're going to be proficient in using it. Just because you watched somebody on YouTube or read a book about it doesn't mean you can do it. I watched on Discovery Channel a guy do heart surgery. Does that mean I can do heart surgery? No. Test your skills and gear. Let's say you went to the campsite with a camp ring. You always had your charcoal and your charcoal lighter fluid and your lighter. Well, now all of a sudden you're a wild camper and you're bringing a ferro rod and you're not bringing tinder. You're going to try to find it in nature. Well, before you get into that and rely on it, go in your own backyard and cut up some shavings and get you some kind of tinder and experiment with your ferro rod. Practice with it. Same thing with if you got bivy sacks, sleeping bags, wool blankets, just a tarp and a wool blanket, whatever. You want to test that stuff and pay attention to how it works. Would you rather freeze in your own backyard, or would you rather freeze out in the middle of nowhere? Test your gear, okay? That was number 3. All right, tip number 4. Know your direction, know your location. Now, the reason that I say this is because you're a wild camper now. And let's say, for example, when you're at the campsite, you drive around the little curve, you park the car, there's a campsite. You got a place to put a tent, you got a cute little fire ring, you know where the bathrooms are. Or if you're hiking on a trail as a backpacker, that's an established trail. You might get lost. Maybe if you're backpacking with Jack Daniels and Captain Morgan, you'll get lost. I don't know. But when you're out here bushwhacking, don't just wander out into the wilderness, okay? Know your direction, okay? If you're standing at the edge of the woods and you're going to walk in somewhere, don't just wander in aimlessly, okay? Take your compass, and with your compass, pick a direction. When you're standing at the edge of the woods, pick a general direction, and like this just happens to be, if I was standing at the woods, pretty much straight ahead is south, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk in south. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to count my paces. And you can use pace beads. I didn't bring mine with me, but you can look those up. There's videos on that. So instead of just wandering off aimlessly into the woods, I can't say it enough, know your location, okay? Know your direction. Stick to your direction. When you walk in south, you're going to come out north, okay? Don't get lost. And the other thing is, once you're going off the trail like this, you're going to be out there by yourself. And if there's no cell phone signal, and if there's no camp host or park ranger, you're going to need a way of signaling people in case something happens. So always carry audio, audible, and visual signals, okay? Preferably a whistle. I'm not going to blow this whistle because I'm wearing a microphone. And then you can carry a signal mirror, or if you got the right kind of compass, your compass will have a mirror that you can signal with. So, did you hear that? That tree's fixing to fall over. The microphone may not have picked that up, but that tree was cracking and about to fall over.
Yeah, sitting here hearing this. I don't know which one it is.
I don't either, but that's leading back to one of the tips on number 5. Now, a little bit more that I want to say on number 4. Know your direction, know your location. Okay, if you want to, go ahead and carry a GPS. If you've got a cell phone signal or if there's a satellite signal, you can use GPS. But in my older years, I've learned a GPS is just an expensive case to protect your dead batteries. So you can't go wrong with a compass and pace beads. But one of the things that I want to emphasize about direction is some of you people that live out to where there's a lot of flat land and there's not a bunch of hills and thick forest, it's kind of easy to navigate by compass. But in areas where there's hills and there's all kinds of stuff like this right here, what you want to see, what you see in a way, you need to learn dead reckoning. Okay, now what I mean by dead reckoning is you don't think that you're just going to take a compass and you're like, oh, I'm going to go south, and so you're going to aim it south, and then you're just going to walk along through the woods while you're staring at your compass bumping into everything. That's not how it works. What you do with dead reckoning is you pick an object and you aim your compass at it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to aim for south, and I'm going to look, and wherever south is, see that big tall dead tree right there that's fixing to fall over and kill everybody?
The white?
Yeah, that's south by my compass. So what I'm going to do is from this point, I'm going to walk to that tree, and when I get to that tree, I'm going to stand in front of that tree, and I'm going to aim my compass again, and I'm going to pick out another object that's south. And then I'm going to walk to that object. Now, the only time this is not real good is whenever you're in an area like a pine forest where all the trees look the same. But this is a pretty varied forest here. You've got pines, you've got hardwoods, you got all different kinds of trees here. So, but that's dead reckoning. That's how you walk in a straight line through the woods. Pick an object, go to it, stand in front of that object, pick your next object, walk to it. And another thing you can do is when you're walking to these objects, let's see if I can find this. This is another tip with knowing your location. See if I can find it. Another thing you can do is every object that you walk to, you can take some yellow ribbon and you can tie some sort of caution tape or a yellow ribbon or some sort of a marker around each one as you go. That way, as you're coming back, not only will you know that you're coming back north, but you're going to know that you haven't gone off, though I don't know how would you call it, off parallelism. And you could, if you're going deep enough in the forest, you can also bring a magic marker and write your name and the date on that tape. So anyway, know your direction, know your location, know you went in, and know how to get back out. All right, so on to number 5. All right, so we've covered the first 4 tips, and the first 4 tips are basically a philosophy or ideology that you can base towards planning your trip and conducting your trip. Now, number 5, I've got 11 tips starting with the letter A. They're like, since there was 11 of them, I thought they were of value to the beginner. So we're going to go through them one at a time, and I have lettered them. Okay, 5A. Now, let's say that you were camping at a campsite. Normally they have the little gravel pads. Normally you're going to set your tent in there and it's nice and flat, or you're going to have a cot in there. Well, once you're out wild camping, you may experience some uneven land. So whenever you set up a tent or a tarp or whatever on uneven land you have found, some of you may know this, some of you may not, but when you lay down, if you can't lay down flat, if the hill is at a slight incline, always put your head at the higher end, always. Because if you lay with your head down at the lower end, all the blood will rush to your head, and in the morning you'll wake up with a headache you'll never forget. Okay, so that's A. Always sleep with your head slightly elevated. All right, 5B, dry clothing, dry sleepwear. Throughout the day as you're walking around, you may not notice it, but your body is slowly putting off a little bit of sweat. a little bit of moisture. Your pores are breathing all the time. Your clothing may feel dry, but if you wore it all day, there's a little bit of dampness in your clothing. And even if it doesn't get super cold at night, you are going to freeze to death if you sleep in the clothes that you wore. Okay? So always carry some extra clothing in your pack to sleep in. And right before bed, strip down, put on your dry clothing, hang your clothing outside if it's not going to rain, or put it somewhere to let it dry out. So believe me, you've got to change into sleepwear, fresh, dry sleepwear. All right? That was tip B, 5B. 5C. Now, C is sort of related to B. Know your materials for clothing. Okay? Doesn't matter if it's underwear, socks, or outerwear. Study up on it. Learn these things. Read reviews on the internet. Read what people think of things. Understand the difference between cotton, nylon, polyester, wool, and even some of the more exotic new fabrics, like I think it's called modal. But because life can be completely miserable, your trip can be ruined down to the choice of the wrong socks. Socks have different uses. There's sock liners, there's regular socks, and like I say, there's wool, cotton, nylon, acrylic, polyester. You need to understand what you're going to wear for the summer, what you're going to wear for the winter, what you're going to hike in, what kind of boots you're going to be wearing, your underwear, how much underwear, what kind of underwear, what kind of shirt you're going to wear. Study up on the clothing. Your clothing is your first defense against the elements. Your shelter is your second defense. Your clothing is a extension of your shelter in a way. It's almost like a wearable shelter. Same thing with a poncho. But know your materials, study up on them, and know what they do. All right? D, underground fires. This is something some of you may know, some of it you may not know. Like I said, this is directed towards beginning wild campers. Now, when you go to a campsite, they have an established fire ring. It may be a big round piece of metal, or it may be a bunch of rocks. Well, when you're out here in the wild, what you want to do is, naturally, you want to clear away some of the leaves. Or sometimes you want to dig like a little shallow depression, dig a hole, build a fire in it. When you're done, fill it up with dirt. Well, here's the thing. Roots underground can catch on fire and smolder for days, and that can be scary. So when you're in an area like this, now you've got some decent trees right over here, but if you look back over here, you can see where those dead trees are? Those two, those stumps are sticking up, and there's one right here. You got all these dead trees on the ground. Right over there, you got that big tall tree over there that's dead. Every one of those trees, I guarantee you, the roots are dead and have no sap in them. Living trees have sap in the roots, are a little harder to catch on fire. But if you was to clear out a spot, this is something you got to pay attention to. When you clear out a spot, don't do it near a dead tree. Dead trees like that, if there's roots under the ground, you can catch those roots on fire underneath the fire. If you've had a fire for 2 or 3 days, it'll warm up the ground, dry it out, and can catch the roots on fire. And then you put your fire out, you've covered it over with dirt, and you leave. Well, what happens then is you've covered it with dirt, you've smothered off the oxygen, and you've caused those roots to smolder, and they will slowly burn for weeks, sometimes months underground. So always pay attention to underground fires and roots and dead trees. Okay? All right? Moving on to the next one. When you're at a campsite, you pull up, set up your tent, you got your cooler in the car, you got your food in the car, no big deal. There's lots of people around everywhere. More than likely there's no bears around. There's so much activity, so many fires, so many people there. You're not going to have to worry much about animals. Now, you've heard of bear bags, okay? Even if you're not in bear territory, you still need a bear bag, because you could have raccoons or possums or any other wildlife getting into your camp, getting into your food supply, digging through your shelter. Now, you can use whatever you want to as a bear bag, but for me, what I like for a bear bag is a dry bag, like the kind you would use on a canoe or a kayak, preferably one that's an obnoxious color like this. So what you're going to do is you're going to put all of your food in here. Not only are you going to put your food in here, if you've got any soap, toothpaste, shampoo, deodorant, anything that's got a unnatural smell that you won't find in the wilderness, put it in a bag here. Now with a dry bag, what you're going to do is you're going to put it in, put all your stuff in, and then you're going to Velcro the top shut, and then you're going to fold it over to where you're waterproof. Once you've done that, you're going to snap this together like this, and then what you're going to do, okay, you've got your bag like this, and you can either use it like this, but they usually come with a ring on them. So what you're going to do now is you've got some paracord, preferably a bright obnoxious color that's got the reflective dots in it. And what you're going to do is tie that to a rock or a stick or something, and you're going to throw it over a branch and drag your bag up in the air. Now, preferably, you see this tree right over here, how it's going up? Follow that tree all the way up, how it's forked. Its fork is wedged on that tree, and then you've got these overhead branches. That's perfect, because what you want to do is throw your paracord up over that, and then lower it down and hang your bag to it, okay? So, you've heard of bear bag. If there ain't no bears in the area, think of it as a critter bag. Keeps out the possums, raccoons, and all the other wildlife, okay? You're gonna need it. All right, this next one is 5F. F as in fun in the woods. All right, now, cat hole. Some of you heard of it, some of you hadn't heard of it. When you're at the campsite, you're gonna stagger out of your tent after you had too much chili or beer, and you're going to go to the latrine. Well, when you're out here camping out here, you don't have a latrine. You have to dig what's called a cat hole, okay? You don't just, there's places where you can go and just pee on the ground, but if you have to do number 2, you don't just do it on the ground at all. Absolutely not. What you got to do is you got to dig a little hole, do your business, and cover it up. So you're going to need a small shovel. Now, they make little plastic shovels, and I've got one somewhere, and I don't really like it. I would much rather use some sort of a folding steel shovel. I think this one's made by Coleman, maybe. There's a lot of different companies that make these things, but make sure it's a good heavy-duty one. But what you want to do is dig a small hole and do your business in it, or if you want to, do your business on a big leaf and then dump it in the hole if your aim is no good. So use a cat hole to relieve yourself. G, wild camper. Now, whenever you go to a campsite, life is good, you're prepared, no surprises. Whenever you're out in the field, especially the first, second, or third time, always take notes. Get you a little field notebook of some kind, okay? Take notes of what worked, what didn't work. Take notes of, if you're like, oh, I should have had so-and-so, write down you should have taken so-and-so. And then another thing is when you're inventorying and carrying your gear, if there's something in your pack, other than a first aid kit, if there's something in your pack you didn't use 2 or 3 times, the stuff that you don't use, write it down and take it out of your pack, okay? The notes are great because you're not going to remember everything when you get back from a trip. So write it down as it's happening. Take notes. You're out in the woods, out in the middle of nowhere, the last thing you want is something in your eye. Whether you're charging through vines and brush, or if you're chopping, you don't want anything in your eye. So bring a pair of safety glasses, okay? At the bare minimum, sunglasses. But sometimes sunglasses can be too dark whenever it's a low light situation. But these are tinted sunglasses. But these things are great for whenever, like I say, you're chopping, you know, with a machete or an axe. Keep stuff out of your eyes. If you're going through like real thick brush, you know, if the place is, let's see, any of this over here, you see back in there how thick all that stuff is if you're going through it. Now, on that account, another thing is don't discount the use of a brimmed hat. Not only will a brimmed hat protect your ears from in case you're out in the sun, but whenever you encounter brush that you're trying to go through and you don't want to get your eyes poked out, all you got to do is lean your head down and just charge through it. See? And you ain't got to worry about poking an eye out. That looked stupid. I mean, there's plenty of, here, let me go around here for a minute. No, you stand over there, Nick.
What, I can follow you?
Well, Let's see. Here's some right here. Stand right here, Nick. You were laughing at me, so I got to say, if your only path of travel was through this, then you could just do this right here. And say I just went through that, and nothing hit me in the eye. That's the value of a brimmed hat. All right, on to the next one. Widowmakers. Okay, always look up. You're always looking down for snakes and things. You're looking ahead. You're looking for branches. Well, take a look here. Look at all these. This is probably the worst place to camp I've ever seen. There's dead trees everywhere. Now, a lot of people assume widowmakers are just a branch that could fall, but it's also an entire tree, because as you can see, look at this one. Let's take a look at this one. There's no way that I would want to camp anywhere near this. Look at the size of this tree. And when I'm standing here looking straight up, all the branches are on one side, so when this thing breaks off, it's probably going to fall in the other direction. And then there's another pine tree over there that's leaned in that direction. This is just absolutely the worst place that you could ever be. This is horrible. Watch out for widowmakers. Look up. Also pay attention to the trees that you tie your hammock to. There was a girl at matter of fact, it happened in Georgia. There was a girl, and it was at Red Top Mountain Park. She's in a hammock, and the tree that she was tied to, the top of the tree came off and landed on her and killed her. So always pay attention to this stuff. These things will kill you while you sleep, quicker than a bear will, quicker than the chili you had the night before. Remember, this is I or J, but this is another tip. Learn to ID trees and plants, okay? Because there's so many things out there that are poisonous that can kill you, and you don't even realize that they're poisonous. Like, let's say that you caught a trout and you're going to shove it over a piece of wood and hang it over the fire, or you're going to take 2 forked sticks and put a roasting spit across it. Well, if you choose the right wood, you can stab your trout on it, no big deal. But if you choose something that you don't know what it is, like the tree called oleander, oleander's toxic. The roots are toxic, the leaves are toxic, the wood is toxic, the bark is toxic. If you stick a fish on a piece of oleander and cook it, and it'll absorb the toxins from the wood, and it'll either make you sick or potentially kill you. So understand wood, be able to ID trees, even be able to ID dead trees. Plants. There's plants like, learn what poison ivy is, learn what poison oak is, learn what poison hemlock is. Y-E-W, learn what that is. All of these plants, some of these plants can kill you. An elderberry tree, you can eat the berries, but the leaves and the roots and the plant itself is all toxic. The only thing you can eat is the berries. And the list goes on and on. It's nothing I can get into. You just have to study and learn how to identify them. So, keep yourself safe. You're going to be out there, you're depending on you. Don't get sick. Don't die. All right, now for the last little tip, it's not more of a tip, it's more of a suggestion. When you're going to a campsite, you're going to either buy wood or bring wood or pick up whatever's around. Well, when you're out wild camping, you're going to be harvesting wood for your fire, and you're going to be setting up probably a wood frame for a shelter or a teepee, or if you're going to learn more advanced techniques, you may be building chairs or maybe even beds. So you're going to need some tools to work with. Everybody needs a knife. You've got to have a knife of some kind, preferably get a knife with a ferro rod for fire. Get a folding saw. If you want to, however you want to carry a folding saw, if you're going to carry one, like say example on this water bottle, be sure and have a lanyard and clip it to it, because see, it's just slid into the molly, but I've got it clipped on here. Now you're going to need, a saw is the safest tool and probably the most handiest tool. In the form of chopping, you're going to want some sort of a camp axe. Now they make hatchets that are real short, and then they make full-size axes. Well, they also make a camp axe, or a boy's axe, which is around 18 inches to 22 inches. That's a Marbles, I think, a 704. That's a good beginner axe right there. And even those that are more efficient with the axe still enjoy a small axe like this. And small axes, not only are they more packable, but they can be safer, because if you have a full length axe and you're chopping, you tend to have your feet straight. If you've got a shorter axe, you tend to spread your legs out real far so that you can get more of a reach. And that's what you want to do. You want to get chips out. You're not chopping for no reason. You want to make every chop count. Okay? Now, for smaller stuff, you're going to want a machete. Now, a lot of my firewood processing is done with a machete and a saw, but I enjoy axe in the wintertime. Buy a machete, learn to use it. There's millions of different machetes. And a real handy thing is if you'll get a machete that's got a pouch on it. It's very rare. There's only, I think, Marbles and Tops has a pouch that has a sheath that has two pouches, which is very handy. Now, if you've only got one pouch, what you can do is you can carry a multi-tool, which will have a smaller knife that you can keep with you, or you can have a Silky Pocket Boy, which is a very small saw, which handles wood up to about 4 inch in diameter, preferably 3 inch. That's a Silky Pocket Boy. So if you got a machete sheath that's only got one pouch, you can carry one or the other, or if you get a Marbles or a Tops, you can have two pouches, which is very handy. So choose chopping tools, learn how to use them, be safe with them, and enjoy them. Okay? All right, so that's it. That is my 5 tips plus a bunch of bonuses for the beginning wild camper. Now, I have to tag someone. What I'm going to tag, I live down south where it stays warm most of the year. So these were my opinions for the beginning camper. Let's ease up north and tag Cole Craven Bushcraft. Okay. Now, I'm friends with him. Been friends with him on YouTube for 8 or 9 years, and I'm also friends with him on Instagram. We talk a lot on Instagram, which leads me to saying, I've always forgotten to say it, but if any of you are on Instagram, you can look me up. I am on there under Really Big Monkey 1. I'm not on there that often, but I am on there. So anyway, Cole Craven Bushcraft. He's a good friend of mine, good guy. He actually teaches survival classes. It's not just a hobby like it is for me. And he lives in New Brunswick, Canada, where it gets real cold. So he's got a lot more cold weather and snow experience than I do. So he should have some value to add to this for the beginning wild campers. So I'm wearing a mic, so I'm going to come forward to see if Nick has anything to say. And I'll pick you up on mic. You got anything to say?
It's freezing out here. Don't wear a t-shirt.
I told Nick to wear a jacket. He's like, ah. So in closing, that's your 5 tips plus bonuses. I have tagged Cole Craven. And just as a matter of interest, I'm going to say the creek that I am standing in leads to the back of Snake Island. And if my estimations are right, you can walk in this creek 2.5 miles, which I think it's possible that can be done. And you can get to the backside of Snake Island this way. It's either 2.5. And maybe one day I'll do that if the boots are deep enough. See, it's not a real deep creek.
Well,
further downstream it may be. Wait a minute, Nick had something to say. I better go over here with the microphone. I said it may not be that deep. What'd you say, Nick?
I was saying, well, it might be kind of deep right here.
Yeah, that spot right there looks pretty deep. and I don't have the boots for that. So I'm gonna walk on down a little ways and see how it looks. But one day I may just make the trip down here to Snake Island. So in the meantime, hope you enjoyed it, hope you had fun, hope you learned something, but we shall see you in the next one.